channel. Today I have with me an old friend, Mike Tuñez, who has been here before, and Eric Hansen. Welcome, guys. And we're going to talk about the new Kickstarter. And I'm very excited because it's a 100 Years War game. Mm-hmm. And if you know my channel, there is nothing except 100 Years War. And that's called Blood and Crowns. Guys, thank you for joining me. Thank you for coming. And to you, let's start and talk about yourselves a bit, a few minutes, and then we're going to go to the rules.
All right, thanks for having us. I'll let Eric go first since he's a first timer on here.
All right, Eric Hansen. I am the developer for Blood and Crowns, of course, and I've been gaming for most of my life since the mid '80s. Cut my teeth on the Red Box Dungeons and Dragons, which kind of gave me my first taste of all things medieval, and it kind of stuck with me. Grew up watching the Robin Hood and all that stuff. Got into historical miniature gaming in the mid '90s, and then kind of just been doing a little bit of everything until about 7-8 years ago. I started getting heavy into the 100 Years War, and then a few years back, right before COVID kind of got going, got in a conversation with Mike, and he said, "Hey, you want to give this a crack and see what you come up with?" And so I gave him a treatment on the 100 Years War Skirmish based on the Blood and Plunder system. And then we've just been kind of cracking at it ever since. Obviously, we got a little bit of a setback with the pandemic, but that's kind of caught us up to here.
Yeah. Well, my name is Mike Tuñez. I am the studio manager at Firelock Games. So we started out with Blood and Plunder, later Oak and Iron, and Blood and Valor. And now we have War Stories and Oak and Iron, and Blood and Crowns, and Blood and Steel, and a few other things. So I've been wargaming since, not since the 80s, since the mid 90s for me. I found out about it when I was, but Eric's a little older than me, so it's gonna be a thing now. I'm just gonna throw that out there every time we have a YouTube channel or something that we're on. But mid 90s for me. I've been on here before, so I don't want to bore everybody with my details. We can carry on from there. I think that's good enough.
Well, we know you from from the games and your company, obviously. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm very excited because guys. I mean, Mike, you know me very well. That I love 100 Years War, and when I saw it. I don't know where I saw the game. I think I saw it in one of the channels. I was very excited because it's not very often you see 100 Years War game specific. It's very nice. It's different because you can have medieval games, but the medieval era is very different from period to period, and different mechanics that would accommodate the different circumstances. The Crusades are different. Wars of the Roses are different. So when I see a period-specific game like this, I'm getting very excited. So I don't know much about the game. I know it's a skirmish game. So if you can talk about around it and your concept. I know it's based on your mechanics, Mike. The cards, with using cards and using some other different stuff. So if you can go around the game, explain the mechanics, the thought behind it, some special rules that you can devour before they release, and then we're going to talk about where the guys can find it, from where they can get it, the Kickstarter, and everything.
Sorry, based on Blood and Plunder, like you said. So Blood and Plunder it's got pretty unique activation system where you're bidding cards against each other to try to activate individual units at a time, and the order in which you do so will limit. So if you could go really fast initiative card, which will give you less actions typically based on the training of your unit. And it's got a little bit of an action management, so a little bit of command and control kind of cooked into that, which is it just makes it real easy for a skirmish kind of game. And everything is resolved with D10s. There's not a lot of math. There's not a ton of modifiers to figure out. It's just kind of the stats of the unit. The biggest thing you'll have to figure out is range. So ranges will typically add penalties to hit, things like that. And there will be a couple, outliers here and there. But I'll let Eric kind of take it from there and talk about where Blood and Crowns uses what we have built and how it changes it and expands on it to get the period flavor out of it.
Yeah, so basically the way it's kind of constructed is we don't really know how they fought. during the late medieval period. We have a lot of guesses, and we have inferred a lot of stuff. But as you know, the chronicles aren't really specific. So one of the things that's kind of that we do know from the records is the indenture and like the Ariar. I'm going to mispronounce this, but the Ariaraban and all that. How they would collect troops, and so you can kind of see that. For like at least under a lord or a captain or whoever happens to be in charge of that indenture or the main person on the indenture, it was really a mixture of troops. So you might have like your foot knights or some some squires or whatever, and then underneath you might also have some men at arms of various quality. You'd have some archers, I think you see mounted archers a lot in the late period. So that's kind of the structure of the game. Is that this is kind of the idea is that you're running a company. And so you have a mixture of troops, and whether you're on a campaign, you're part of a chevauchée, you're doing a kinetic forging, and so you're just like a mixed group going out and doing some mission or something like that. And that's kind of the cool thing, because most of your mass games for 100 Years' War kind of group all the different troop types together. So this gives you a chance to, in at least a plausible way, put them all on the table together in a small scale engagement. And what's cool about that is, since you're kind of alleviating that restriction of having to be in big blocks and it's being a skirmish game, of course you can add more terrain. You're not in the middle of a lot of the big set battles, they wanted a lot of space, whether, I know early on, like you were saying, that the different periods or the different parts of the medieval period, you had the large cavalry charges. Well, later it was, you still needed everybody kind of be together. So this is kind of zooming into the action and lets you run around amongst buildings, through woods, jumping over walls, going into buildings. And then, of course, probably the big thing that sets it apart is that, just like with Blood and Plunder, is you have the ability to do the sea battles. So you can do ship on ship, that last kind of maneuvers as the ships come together. You're softening your opponent, you grapple, and then you're fighting from ship to ship and trying to get into the person's castle and fight them off and all that kind of fun stuff. So that's kind of the period flavor. It actually fits really well. I think it was a question I got at one point. People were kind of a little like, hey, this skirmish, how does it fit? And I think it really does. It captures that chaotic in between the big battle type stuff. So.
Okay, so it's very interesting that you can have naval battles. That's very good. Many gamers specific for 100 Years' War are asking for this. There were many famous battles, like Sluis, very famous naval battles during the 100 Years' War. So from what I understand, you controlling a retinue, a company, your own retinue as a lord. That's how it starts. This is the concept. And you mentioned something before. Can you use these rules? Are they campaign friendly? Do they have a continuation? Can they be used for a campaign? Are they accommodating the campaign? Or the continuous battle, or the continuous. So one battle will have consequences to the next one. That's what I'm saying.
I haven't gotten there yet. I want to get there eventually. And kind of what I've kind of thinking through it is, I think it'd be neat to do a campaign around a chevauchée. Because, and then there's some kind of built-in. So one of the things that's so in Blood and Plunder, you have what are called breakpoints. So as your unit, or your company or your group, your force is bad stuff happens, you start to degrade. Like you're getting breakpoints, and eventually your force will just disappear. Well, I kind of turned it slightly for this period. Is you're constantly trying to gain renown. By doing feats of arms. So you have, for example, one of the innovations in this one, or the period flavor things, is you can your leader, and I think like one or two of the characters has what's called the prize special ability, so they can actually be captured, and that earns you renown. And then if you're holding a captive, you can always go rescue. If your leader's been captive, you can go try to rescue him, and you'll earn renown for rescue him. So it's constant like climbing of renown. Well, in the back of my head, and I would love to see at some point build some campaign rules around that, where renown is like your campaign currency. So the more glory you're earning in the campaign, you're attracting better units. You're able to get resupplied, that kind of stuff. And then maybe you're, if you're the attacking force, maybe we have like fires in the game. You can actually the terrain trade. You can just like in Blood and Plunder, you can catch stuff on fire. So maybe you go, your mission is to burn down a farm. So the more you burn, you're degrading the enemies, your opponents, maybe with some type of, morale or some of the people in the area, that kind of thing. So there's definitely some hooks in there. I just haven't got a chance to really frame anything out yet.
Yeah, no, it's from what I understand, yeah, it can accommodate because this Renown idea is very good.
Yeah.
But how? I mean, I know that the game is a Kickstarter, and I've seen it because I'm also I joined the Kickstarter, and if something comes from the Middle East, it's me. Please send it quickly there. It's me. I want to ask you if I don't know if it's possible to talk about the mechanics of it, the procedure, how we start. I mean, the movement, you go, I mean, now I'm talking on the top of my head from what rules I know. You start with the movement, you go to shooting, hand-to-hand combat, how it works. Just to have an idea of how the rules work, I mean, I don't know how much you can tell, but just to give an idea to the viewers of how the mechanics work. And from the beginning and to how it's a phase, for example, you have battle phases, you have it's I'll go, you go, just something like this, so we can understand how the rules work.
Yeah, I'll interject the so all the blood and systems. There you go. He's putting up a card. Blood and Crowns is the one that's most like Blood and Plunder, where all the systems in general, the turn phase is going to be the first thing you do in a turn is you draw cards, or in other games you have some kind of initiative mechanic like Blood and Valor, which is our World War I game. You have you generate a pool of points that you will use to bid. In Blood and Steel, another one, you'll roll a set of D10s and set those out in front of you for your opponent to see, and you're going to bid out of those. But Blood and Plunder and Blood and Crowns both use a deck of cards, and you'll see there the card he's showing you. You've got the suits. The suits are going to determine your initiative, right? So a spade is the fastest initiative card, followed by a heart, then a diamond, then a club. So, so you see there's little pips on the bottom of the card. You can use regular playing cards, but our cards have the little shortcuts. So you'll see there's pips on the bottom right, and that'll kind of give you your initiative. More pips is better. The number on the top left will break ties. And then based on the training of your unit, you're getting anywhere from 1 to 3 actions. So you'll see that the spade there on a veteran unit, for example, will give you 2 actions, but the diamond will give you 3. And then the trained and inexperienced both get 1, and they get 2 on a diamond. And those will vary a little bit as you go through the cards. So you're going to draw a hand of cards. In Blood and Crowns, you're going to draw cards equal to whoever has the most units. So if Eric and me and Eric are playing a game, and Eric has 10 units and I have 3 for whatever weird reason, typically there's not that much disparity. We're both going to draw 10 cards, right?
At least not the first turn.
Yeah. And then from there, we can kind of discard. Whoever has the least amount of cards can kind of like use those as pass cards, the difference. So it keeps it balanced. It really helps. It's very helpful for elite forces to be able to do well against more horde kind of forces if you want to build them that way. So what happens is you place, each time you're going to activate a unit, we'll each place a card face down. And once we've done that, we flip them. And then that's going to reveal who's going to go first. So whoever has the higher initiative will give their units we'll pick one unit, assign the card to it, give it the actions that they have. Then the other player will resolve their card, and then you're going to then you're going to play another set of cards until you've activated all of your units, or you're out of cards, or so. And from there, in that phase, that's where you're going to move. You're going to fight. So the actions are going to basically be like move, shoot, reload if you need to reload, ready, or do different things like that. Rally to get your morale up. Within that, when you activate commanders will give you the ability to activate other units nearby with their command points. So you can kind of do coordinated moves when you activate your commander. You can move 3 units at a time potentially with a single action. So the commander's influence on the battle is significant. And then from there, you kind of just go into an end phase and wrap up. And I'll let Eric kind of jump in and fill in the gaps from there. But that's basically the turn structure and what it looks like. And you typically play about 6 turns. But go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the only thing. And then so from that, like the two, so a couple things I would toss out is that the one thing that I did with this is a collaboration with Mike is that for this version, we have what's called a fight back. And this is this is introducing kind of a new concept to those who are familiar with Blood and Plunder. So there is a little bit of simultaneous combat in there. And then it ties into probably the most unique feature of all the systems. And it's the common thread is the fatigue. So the idea is that I think it's a nice balance, because sometimes you can lose a unit just through straight up attrition. They get wiped out, they're gone. But then they can also break if they get too much fatigue on them, and that degrades their performance. But it can also be rallied back. So going back to like what Mike was saying with the leaders, some leaders can. Well, in this case, I think in Blood and Plunder you can have inspiring leaders. And then in Blood and Crowns, most of your inspiring is coming from the banner itself. So like if you decide to include a royal banner, or depending on the legendary leader, if you pick one. So you got to kind of protect the flag. And that keeps it can kind of help your troops be motivated and stuff like that. So that's pretty much the gist of it. I mean, did we miss something?
So you use the cards to command your units, and you say you have actions, so you can choose move, shoot, charge.
Right.
So that's interesting, because obviously at a point in the battle you won't be able to do everything you want, so you have to prioritize. I cannot shoot, but I need to raise the morale, so you have to rally your troops. So I can imagine it will give you strategic options to make a decision of what is most appropriate for that time of the battle, for your division, for your retinue, correct?
Right. Yeah. And an important tie-in to that, which he brought up, which I should have brought up in my explanation, is the fatigue system. So the fatigue is basically a mechanic in which anytime you are pushing there's ways where you could give yourself fatigue to do more action, things like that, right? So there's also whenever you're hit by an attack, you take a test to see if you take fatigue based on your resolve. And it's typically you're going to roll 1 dice just if you got hit, and then you're going to add a dice for every casualty you take. So if you got hit really hard, you take a lot of casualties, you could potentially stack up a lot of fatigue. So what fatigue will do is, as it builds up, it's going to take away your actions. So there's some cards that have high initiative that we're basically going to end up giving you no actions for that unit, because you could always rally. So you're not going to do nothing, but you're not going to do anything tactically significant, I should say. So you're not going to be charging or shooting or doing anything like that if you're playing a fast card on that unit, because now they've been slowed down by their kind of disorder and panic. So it gives a very good kind of back and forth feel, and it's important to how you archery becomes very important in that regard. Even if it's not causing casualties, it's typically putting fatigue, because it's consistently firing at an enemy that's advancing on you and potentially freezing them in place, or just allowing you to gain the initiative by having less fatigued units, which will let you act faster, more effectively.
Yeah, I understand. Fatigue is sorry to interrupt. Fatigue is an excellent idea, because I think it's missed from many rule sets, and it was one of the most important parts of a battle, regardless of the era. And when you have fatigue, when you have in your mind that if you shoot twice, for example, you're going to have problem in the next round because your company will be fatigued, then you make different choices and play the game differently and with better forethought. So I think fatigue is a great idea, guys. I'll see how you are, but it's a great idea, and was part of the 100 Years' War. The armies were not fighting continuously, and there were reserves there. They were coming in the front for the troops were fighting to get a rest. It was a continuous rotation during the 100 Years' War. I mean, you cannot imagine even these guys who were very strong that would be able to fight with a sword and a spear for 3-4 hours. So this fatigue is a brilliant idea. Brilliant idea. Fantastic. How do you? The battle is fought how, with dice, D6. How it is, or D10s? How do you fight the battle? D10.
Yeah.
And how do you roll? Is it per miniature? Is per retinue? How it works? How the mechanics?
It's typically per miniature, but I think Eric was going to go.
Yeah.
Oh no, yeah, I was just nodding yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. It's kind of your basic war game mechanic, right? So it's one of those things that if it isn't broke, don't fix it, right? So it's every model for different things. So you have the main stats are your training, right, which is going to determine how many actions you get on a card. Your fight, and your shoot, which those two are broken down into 2 values. One is your offensive value, the other one's your defensive value. Okay. And they just have target numbers on them, and if you hit that target number, you've scored a hit, any kind of modifier aside. And then you have your resolve, which is what you're going to use to try to avoid fatigue and to remove fatigue when you have it. And then, of course, you'll have some special rules for various things, as well as weapons and equipment, which will modify what you do. Heavy plate guys, for example, will roll extra dice on their defense, with a better chance to kind of get rid of some hits.
And the movement is with inches. They move as how is the feel, the look of the battle? I mean, are they move as a group, or they're more like line rampant style, that their individual minis like separated from each other like a swarm? How is the movement of the game? How the units look in your, as per your rules? You know what I'm saying? I hope.
Yeah. I got you. Go ahead, Eric. That one's for you.
Oh yeah, it's so it's loose formations. I think it's the rules as written is every model has to be within 1 inch of at least one other model in the unit, and 4 inches from every other model. So it creates like a little circle, for lack of better. And then when you're on ship, it's more just how many models are in like the section of the ship, like a deck section or a castle or like a building. So then it's kind of more abstracted. They're just assumed to occupy that whole little area. So you don't have to worry about like, okay, I'm 3 inches away from this guy on the deck of the ship. You're attacking at that point from section to section. So it streamlines the naval rules a lot. And that's straight up stolen from Blood and Plunder. Okay,
yeah, I understand. In melee, how's melee works? Do you you fight as a unit, or you fight as individual miniatures? And have you considered? I mean, it's a skirmish games, obviously, but have you considered like supports or melee reactions? Is there something that you had in your mind, or it's just a straight fight and then you're removing miniatures? How the mechanics of the battle work?
So basically, every unit has a common set of statistics, so they're going to fight the same. Mm-hmm. So because this was a little more melee heavy than Blood and Plunder, and even I think in some degree Blood and Valor, I think Blood and Steel has they have units that are a little more melee heavy too. Mike can correct me on that, but
Zulus and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So you have, but then so everybody kind of fights the same, and then there's a little bit of like variance built in there. So for example, like pikemen have a little bit of special ability that reflects if they can take more of a defensive posture and be a little more effective when they get attacked. It's analogous. I used the term Shiltron in the rules. Recognize I fully concede that it is not a true Shiltron, but I try to use those period terms that people are familiar with to capture that. Because if you have if you're getting charged by 6 guys and you have 6 pikes, you're going to have, and you're braced, you're going to have a reasonably good chance of fending them off. Because as you know, from what everything we understand, the mass cavalry charge requires mass. And in a skirmish game, you're much more loosely formed and stuff like that. So that kind of draws it in. There is one combined arms unit in the game, which I think is a little different than anything that's been introduced so far as I can think of. I can't think of an example. Mike can correct me. So like your heavy crossbowmen will be able to take a PVCA upgrade and convert some of those models to like spearmen holding the shields, and they kind of act like mobile cover. So you'll have light cover as you move around the battlefield, and it gives them a little more flexibility, a little more tactical options and stuff like that. So there is a little bit of combined arms, and then of course your big guys, your men at arms and your retinue can take an upgrade to reflect, especially in the later period, like I just call it pole axes, but to cover all of the can opener weapons. As they usually, they had the multi tools, we call them, whatever, the Swiss Army knives of opening up the knights. So, and they get a little bit of a bonus from that. So it's kind of a long way to answer that question. Is that there's a core common mechanism, and then there's a little bit of branch off to gather some of the flavor of different units.
Is it? Will you? I mean, Are you consider that the game is focused on the late part of the 100 Years' War, or it can accommodate even the early part, like Crécy and Poitiers, or you most Agincourt period?
Starts pretty early, before the war, technically, right?
Okay. So officially, it covers 1340, and I'm going to get the date wrong, but 1343, 1346 through the end of the war, 1453. But I dip, for example, like with the Scots, the War of Scottish Independence is so influential to the first phase of the 100 Years' War that
Exactly,
I
yeah.
decided to include, kind of dip a little earlier and get them. And then all of the main parts there. Somebody asked me this on on the Q&A. All of your main meat is there to be able to even go like into the War of the Roses. So there's certainly some options if people want to kind of start playing out, coloring out the lines. It's there. Like I think the only leader that is the legendary leader, because the game includes, just like Blood and Plunder, you have some named characters that you can upgrade your retinue with. And so like the only named leader that's technically outside the 100 Years War is Robert the Bruce. He's in there.
Okay, yeah, he's a bit earlier, yeah, but he can join.
And it works because if you can fight like unit, like the different lists. You can fight, say, a list from the Loire campaign against a Scottish War of Independence campaign, because it's assumed the numbers are balanced to assume that they're analogous to their contemporaries. So I use the term full harness for an armor upgrade, again, to capture that period terminology. But if you were to give, say, Robert the Bruce's retinue in that, we know that the full harness is not, it's a later development, but it's to reflect the fact that they have better armor on.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. It doesn't mean anything. It's just the difference between armor. How many miniatures would you need to enjoy the game? Really, obviously, skirmish game you can play with 10, but in order to enjoy the game and get everything out of it, how many miniatures per army you need to have?
I think the sweet spot, Mike, see if you disagree with me. I think the sweet spot is somewhere between 20 and 30. And then once you get comfortable, go a little higher.
So we've been primarily playing out of Perry boxes, and it seems like a single Perry box is really sufficient model count wise, right? Like you probably want to get some more stuff to throw in some variety, like some cavalry or some more men at arms and things like that. But otherwise, that seems about right. What are those boxes? I think those boxes are like 35, roughly, right? So. And then with that, you get a good amount of variety. With 35, and you mix it up, so like 2 or 3 of those Perry boxes is really going to go a long way for you. That's going to give you a lot of options on what you can do, and with even the amounts, and if you want to get into some kit bashing and try to make some jinetes like I've been trying to do, then you could get a little more. But that's probably about right. Yeah, you can go as high. What's the biggest game you've done, Eric? That's a good.
I want to say
lean into that. You've had some pretty big ones that I've seen. Yeah,
I want to say we topped 40 models per player in one game I did.
But the whole table,
it was managed. Yeah, giant. it was a full 4x6
table.
Had
much more than 40.
Oh yeah. For the big tables, that was, I think, I have it somewhere close to 70 or 80 models per side, and that was with 3 players per side, maybe a little more.
Yeah, and it played pretty good.
That would have been my next question, because I was discussing with Eric before you joined us, Mike. Are the rules? I know there's skirmish rules, but can the rules accommodate larger games with a little bit of house rules maybe there? But for example, I'm a big game. I love big game. I'm not saying you're gonna put 2,000 miniatures, but I'm saying that, for example, I like 60, 70, 80 per side. Let's say, can it accommodate big games? You think?
No, definitely, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Eric has run quite a few at that size at our local convention here in Orlando.
I think we were saying before the call. I put 25 models at the command of, like, on a multiplayer game in a hand of somebody who'd never played the game, and we came to a reasonable resolution within 4 hours at a convention. So there's obviously all that padding that comes with running a game at a show. With a lot of distractions and stuff like that. Easily, and that was, like I said, that was somebody who had never even played Blood and Plunder, so had absolutely no basis of comparison or kind of foundation in the mechanics of the rules. You get somebody that's familiar with the system, and like I was saying, so basically, I don't have official Grand Company rules yet, but they're kind of in my head. And the way it would work is you just have the card mechanic. You just have one player acting as the overall commander, and then he just plays the card, and then every player on that side activates a unit, whatever, at a time, so everybody stays engaged. And that's kind of I know we kind of, I don't know if we touched on it or not, I can't remember now, but the one really awesome thing about the card mechanics is it keeps players engaged constantly. So even in a multiplayer game, I don't know, we've all been to the shows where it's like I do one move and then like an hour later I might move my unit again. But it's not the case. Like it's because of the way the cards are, you're constantly paying attention to what your opponent's doing. It seems like it doesn't take long to activate a unit. You're not waiting for somebody to activate their entire side. You know, they're doing one quick unit and now it's your turn. And then it goes back and forth and it's very rapid back and forth.
Yeah. And its bones are very much in the Blood and Plunder realm, where we have myself and Rufus and Kai have put on some pretty enormous Blood and Plunder games with definitely well over 150 miniatures per side, like 370 models or some total like that on the table with a lot of players. I think that's like a 12-player game or something like that. But same thing, like, believe it or not, that game resolution in under 4 hours. So it does scale up pretty well. There are rules in Blood and Plunder and Blood and Valor and Blood and Steel currently for that you could just kind of rip out and use in Blood and Crowns, and it'll work fine. There's several ways to do it. One of the ways is you could just, if you're playing if you're playing against somebody else, you could build several retinues, right? And then treat each one activates on one card, and that's good for if two players are playing bigger armies. You activate an entire retinue with a single card, and then they take all their actions. Your opponent goes back and forth and does the same. So it just basically makes the units gigantic, but lets you take kind of mixed units, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's it makes it, and then there's a general. There's always a general, not really a general, but somebody in command of the whole thing. So one main leader that can influence the other ones.
Didn't we run like 6 ships versus 6 ships? That game you cheated?
I don't recall the cheating per se, but yes, that was more than that. You guys had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, you guys had 6, I think, and we had 4.
Well,
something like that.
Well,
but
let's tell the audience what one of the ships was, though.
What? I think I think one of them was a sloop. There was at least one sloop out there. Is that what you're referring to?
No, I'm referring to the 6 rate that you guys released in the game I was playing against me.
We released a Man of War the day of for the purpose. I held back the release on purpose so I could take it into that game without anybody knowing it was coming. So
you can send me photos, guys. Yeah,
technically not even.
So I want to ask you. So we start with, in my experience, games that have cards are also very solo friendly. I'm saying this because I'm a solo gamer, and even if I play both armies, cards give you an unpredictability that it has a solo feel, and it's fun with cards, and it really makes it more interesting even when I'm playing alone. So that's something that sounds good. So you start with drawing cards, activating, then doing actions during the battle, and then your units, your companies getting fatigued. What are the victory conditions? How do you win?
So it's kind of like Blood and Plunder, and is that once you've exceeded your opponent's renown by 2, starting on turn 4, you'll have to test to see if your whole company breaks. Okay. But what's neat about it is like there's a lot of ways to earn renown. So if you're running a specific scenario, for example, like you're supposed to burn. So I think I literally include burn and pillage, or pillage and burn as 2 of the scenarios. So you catch a building on fire, you get a renown. But it's kind of built in that I've done this before, and Mike can to test. I don't know if he's done this too, but like with Blood and Plunder, I'll do like uncapped. We're going to do 6 turns no matter what, and see what the break points are. So you can certainly do that with Blood and Crowns as well. Like just go full 6 turns and see who has the most renown, and then and walk away with the victory. But rules is written, and it kind of the reason why I did it the way I did it was because I know there's a big tournament or competitive scene with Blood and Plunder. So I wanted to create the rules as written to be kind of guide that effort. So you could play a very quick competitive game and then deviate from that, whatever play style you want to do.
Okay. So basically, you can, and that's very interesting. You can accommodate the game regarding to your needs and the time you have. You can have a big game and play for 3-4 hours, or play for a few days if you are playing on it, or you can finish in half an hour, for example. It's really interesting. This.
Yeah, I played a game last week. I was showing a buddy of mine the mechanics because he wanted to back Kickstarter, and he has the luxury of living in Miami, so he gets to try the game. So we played a very small game, about 100 points. He was playing the English, so he only had like 13 models. I was playing the French, so I had like 17. He had a more elite force, and we played on a 2-foot by 2-foot board, just nicely set up. And that, about 30-45 minutes, got it all wrapped up. So you can play real small, you can play real big. It's very flexible in that regard.
No, that's very good. I'm gonna play test the game in the channel as soon as I get it. Yes, for sure. I'm gonna review it. It sounds very good. It sounds very interesting. Actually, I'm running a campaign now, a campaign game in my channel, and I think your rules would have been perfect. I will run a second one when I get them. They sound really interesting, and they can accommodate campaign. And I think a couple of house rules, they can be perfect. From what I understand now, what you're telling me.
And I just thought of something. I don't think we actually answered your question, because I realized that. So you asked about solo rules. There are solo rules for Blood and Plunder that would translate very, very easily into Blood and Crowns. I don't know. We've actually never talked about this, Eric, but I don't know if you've ever looked at the Blood and Plunder solo rules. But that is probably something that we can work on. Because that would be pretty. It would be a pretty reasonably low effort thing to do. Take some time, obviously, but to test and make sure it works. Because there's some variance there. Some places you gotta test things, but yeah, that's something that I can pretty much guarantee will happen at some point. Very soon, probably. Yeah.
From my experience as a gamer, and especially the medieval game, 100 Years' War, I know that many gamers like. Well, there are not rules outside like this, but many gamers like games that can be solo friendly as well, and they can accommodate a campaign. Everybody loves a campaign. Everybody wants to have games that are, the previous battle has consequences in the next battle, and that's why my campaign recently is quite popular. So I think your rules, from the things you're telling me, and obviously I will read them, are very open to injections of things like that will make them work very easily. That's what I understand.
It would be a neat companion with, like, say, a mass battle game. I've always kind of had that back in my head. Is we'll have to talk, Mike. But to be able to, like, zoom in and out of the action, so you could have like a campaign where you're maneuvering, say, through an enemy territory, and you're doing the little battles with Blood and Crowns.
Yes.
And then if you culminate to like some big mass battle, that would be amazing. I would love to do something like that. It's so cool.
Yeah. We've got some mass battle rules that kind of plug in that we've been cooking up for a little bit to use for smaller scale stuff and things like that. So definitely room for that in the future.
Yeah. Skirmish games are popular. Skirmish games are very popular because obviously of the space of people, and obviously not everybody wants to pay 500, 600 miniatures, but it's good to have the option to get big, and for some gamers. I didn't ask a retinue. How many miniatures How many miniatures you must have for one retinue?
All the units start at 3 miniatures.
Okay.
And then depending on the unit type, it's gonna you have a max unit size of either 6, 8, or 12.
Okay. So it depends on you the size you want. That's good.
Yeah.
Last I checked, it was the 12 was the biggest, I think. Yeah.
I think 12. Like, so you're like feudal levy, I think can go up to 12. And then if you add Paviciers,
most are 8.
Most. The bulk of your line troops are 8. And then the more elite troops are 6. Like your men at arms are all 6 and everything like that. And I did that, because again, I'm not going to come to your house and tell you not to do something. So you could definitely like up the numbers if you and your opponent want to try it out. Please, by all means, tell me how it goes because I'd be curious.
He's not, but I am. I will go and take your dice.
Mike will come to your house. He did that one time when I did something with Blood and Plunder, and I learned my lesson. But the idea is I found that like it just kind of balanced out that way. The tougher units, it's very difficult to uproot a retinue in this game. I mean, like they can take some heat before they finally give out, especially when you drop a legendary leader in there. So
What card decks you have in the game? I know there is the commanders, I think, and what decks are included in the game?
So there's two. There's the one Eric showed you is a Blood and Plunder set of cards, but we're basically making one like that that's just more kind of themed around Blood and Crowns. So it's a that's your activation deck. So that you can use again. You can use regular playing cards, but the ones that we have available, they're just going to make it easier because they've got all the game information printed on it already, so you don't have to reference anything. Then the other cards are unit cards. So those are going to be the stats of the unit. So all the special rules, the options, how to build them, etc. Like that's what their fight, their shoot, their resolve, their training, their equipment, etc. So that's what's going to be. That's what the other card deck is. So those are the two card decks. Two totally different things. One's just a reference for your unit, so you have it handy. You don't have to have the book open or go back and forth or make roster sheets or anything like that. Just a few cards, and you got everything you need. And then the other ones is the ones that kind of drive the game.
And the army list.
So you have that's a good idea.
The army lists also have no problem. The army lists also have a card, so you'll have your with whatever because so each faction breaks down into a series of lists, and so you'll pick a list, and that's how you construct your force.
Yeah. What factions do we have in the game?
So we got the big. I kind of grew. Okay, so this is one of those things where I've already had players reach out to me and like start to like ask questions about why I group certain things certain ways. So I decided to go with a much more modern terminology and to group under like big headings. So for example, I did England, Ireland, and Wales to represent the Crown of England at that time. And then France covers all of France, including the independent duchies of Burgundy and Brittany out of the gate.
Oh, okay.
And then within the list, then we got Scotland, and then the Spanish kingdoms, which is pretty much just Castile and Leon right now, and then Unaligned, which it's the only faction with two lists because they're pretty flexible lists. But I have a free company, and then also pirates. So
that's nice.
So yeah, and then within the list, I do try to kind of grab some of the more like the smaller the smaller things. Like for example, like in an English list, there's an upgrade you can take for footmen that isn't available for your Welsh spearmen. You have to keep them as regular footmen, but if you take like a higher tier footman that represents the Gascons, or like the Aquitaine, the troops from Aquitaine, you can upgrade those troops with a little bit better fighting capability. So to kind of get that flavor of the different individual regions underneath the broader umbrella. And I recognize, obviously France wasn't what we see France on a map today, but it kind of was one of those decisions that I had to make it consumable to most people. And most people, if I said Brittany or Burgundy or Aquitaine, would go, I don't know what you're saying. And that's fine. That's how I was 7 years ago until I really started digging into it. And my goal is that my hope, I should say, is that when people start reading this, that they will take the time to go learn more about what makes Brittany special and what makes Burgundy special and the Champagne region and why did the Dauphin went to the Loire Valley to hide out when Henry V was on the rampage and stuff like that. Because I've been to France and I've had I've been blessed enough to go to both UK and France, and the regions are so rich in culture, and I hope and encourage that people dig in deeper into those things.
Yeah. One question I want to ask you before, but I forgot. You have how do you divide your command? It's you have captains and higher commanders, or how is the command? I mean, I know the command and control has to do with the cards, but what are the commanders and how many retinues a commander can I don't know order, and is there a command range? Just because I'm asking these questions. I remember I was doing a discussion live on the channel a long time ago, and I was very surprised that many of the gamers were more interested in the command and control than the melee. So it's something that it seems that the gamers 100 years old like. So if you can give me an example, what you have captains, you have command ranges, how it works.
So roughly speaking, every company
roughly don't go into detail around, I don't want to.
So there's 4 tiers of retinue in the way. So like the captain of your company can either be a magnate, a noble, or a knight banneret. And then if you're doing a sea battle, you can have the option of taking a merchant captain.
Okay.
So, and each one, they have their own stat lines. The noble magnate and knight banneret are pretty similar. The big thing that sets them apart is the number of command points and the range in which they can give those command points. And I think the resolve is a little different, the different tiers. And that's to kind of give everybody as much flexibility as possible. Beyond that, then what happens is each list is broken down into 3 sections. So you have the main battle, the vanguard, and the reserve. And you can pick as many main units as you want. And for every 2 units you have of a main choice, you can pick 1 vanguard. And for every 3 main units, you can pick 1 reserve. So for example, if you had 6 main units, you could have 3 vanguard and 2 reserves. So it kind of, and that was kind of like, and what's nice about that is Blood Plunder does something very similar. I just added a 3rd tier. So the idea is that going back to your question about big games is that it scales very nicely. So you can have elite forces, but it's not like, you know how you use some game systems, you'll have those people like, they'll just like dump a certain unit, like a ton of one type of unit and kind of overwhelm. This kind of it has a nice little, as you scale the points up, it kind of balances the forces out. And what's cool about it is, this is kind of a question that comes up a lot, is to represent these units, there's a lot of flexibility. So the way I've kind of been explained to people is like a footman is a very, very broad term. And so as long as so if you like model, say for a model, have a model with a spear, you can use them as a footman. You can use them as a veteran footman. As far as I'm concerned, if the spear is long enough, if your opponent's cool with it, you can use them as a pikeman. So there's a lot of reuse with the model. So you, like you were saying, I think before we started recording, is some people get like really intimidated by the painting piece, because and so the Blood and Plunder is like this too, is you can paint one model and use it for say 3 or 4 different unit types.
Nope.
And as you know, of course, there's like always the follow-on question is, well, how do I differentiate the units? And so like there's little tricks you can do. You know, I've seen people paint and this is the same thing with Blood and Plunder. You know, paint the edge of the stand is one thing to color code them. What I've been doing is using your heraldry banner to mark the commander unit. And then like, you know, the long standard, the tailed or the fork-tailed standard, if you take that upgrade. And then if like, say you have a veteran unit, you just use a generic, like a saint banner to show that that's a veteran unit. Little tricks like that. So even though, because they all look roughly the same. I mean, a man-at-arms is a man-at-arms. It's kind of hard to tell from the model if he's a veteran or not, you know, so a lot of flexibility is, I guess, the point of all that.
No, your command rules sound amazing, especially you talked about Knights Banneret and all these divisions. Brilliant. I'm really looking forward to playing the game.
And of course, you also have the option. Sorry, one more little addendum there.
No, it's okay. I don't want to take more from you because I know you're still in Kickstarter, so that's why I'm not asking too many questions.
Oh, no problem. I don't mind.
Ask them all.
Yeah. So you also have the option of each faction has legendary leaders. And so each legendary leader has a tier that it kind of can replace. So for example, Henry V, if you take a magnate retinue, costs a little more than the other two, you can replace your magnate leader for another upgrade cost to put Henry V out there. And so that ties in there too.
So the better the leader, the better the retinue. So like this, did I understand it correctly? So you're assuming that it's Henry V with his personal bodyguards, let's say, for example, a very tough unit to beat. I find these things, my channel is 100. I could name it 100 Years War on the channel, but I'm very surprised I have 4,000 followers with only 100 Years War. But the rules sound to me very, very interesting. I would say, amazing. You have thought, you kept your mechanics of Firelock Games, but at the same time, you dwelled deep into the 100 Years War, the command, the retinues. It seems to me very well thought. The process behind the game is very well thought of, depicting the period. So I think that's what I understand from what you're telling me.
Yeah. Well, thanks to COVID, I had a lot of time to think about it.
Yeah. And it's and thank you for saying that. I mean, that's kind of true of all of our games, really. We try to get we have a core system that kind of just works to represent skirmish combats, right? And then that could be tweaked in different directions to go, like, for example, the First World War. There's nothing that could be farther possibly from the 100 Years' War than the First World War as far as style of fighting, right? So, but the same underlying mechanics are there, but there's a lot of little subtle things that you throw in, like the difference in initiative, the different, like there's no trained inexperienced veteran, because in that conflict everybody's pretty much same. So some of those things become just little changes, just add to the flavor and make it work. And even though it's a totally different setting, the mechanics can drive it forward with just minor modifications, and we've taken full advantage of that, as you can see. So and we've got more coming. So there's quite a few more systems coming down the pike with this Blood and Games thing we're calling it. So
before we close, and I thank you both for coming. And I'm going to say we're talking about the game. It's a Kickstarter. All whatever you say, the links I have already from America, I will put them in the description. Just what else you have in the pipeline from Firelock Games except Warlord today? You have more games to come. I mean, I'm going to invite you again, but just give us an idea of what's coming up.
Yeah. We've got a pretty full schedule. We're staying pretty busy over here. So after Blood and Crowns, the very next thing up on deck is going to be a new game called Port Royal, and it is a warband game. So it's kind of a even smaller skirmish. You're going to start out with 5 or 6 models, and this is very campaign driven thing. So this is each individual guy matters, right? So it's the setting is basically it's Port Royal, Jamaica, 1692. A massive earthquake and tsunami pretty much devastates the entire island. Port Royal was built on sand, literally. So when there's an effect called liquefaction, where basically in the earthquake the sand turns into liquid, and buildings are just falling into the ground. People are getting sucked down into the ground. The earth shifts; it shoots them back out. And the tsunami washes ships ashore. So there's buildings standing at 45-degree angles, and all kinds of chaos and craziness that ensues. In the middle of this earthquake and in the time following, there's, of course, because Port Royal was known as a major privateering hub for the Buccaneers and such. So these guys are all out there. All these pirates and privateers and other ne'er-do-well types are out there immediately looting. Right. So this game represents your small little group that's looting through the ruins and fighting other groups that are doing the same, or maybe even the authorities who are trying to stop you from doing so.
Okay.
So, and it's going to be based. It's going to be a very kind of compact game. So really easy thing if you're kind of interested in wargaming. Very easy to get your dip your toe in the waters. You just got to paint about 6 models more or less, and that's more than sufficient to get you going. And so right after that, we've got a few other things. We've got an RPG coming out for called Under the Black Sail, which is kind of ties in with Port Royal and Blood and Plunder and that Oak and Iron and that whole setting. And this is we're encompassing all the games here for that setting and taking it for all we can. So that's coming pretty soon. We've got the one that we haven't really talked about a whole lot is we basically got another Blood and system that is designed that's Blood and Sorcery, which is a medieval, very late medieval, early Renaissance. Maybe that's not even a stretch. It's just it's a fantasy game basically. So, which is pretty cool. It's to my knowledge, and maybe there's been others that I'm not aware of, but to my knowledge, it'll be the first kind of 28mm scaled skirmish game that incorporates naval combat in a fantasy setting. So that's kind of a unique thing. And we've got a few other things. We've got a rule set for Spanish Civil War in the works that kind of tie in with Blood and Valor. We're looking at a Napoleonics system that Rufus. Turns out Rufus, who I don't think you've ever had Rufus on here, but he does a lot of work with us at the cons and writes some rules and different things for us. He did Blood and Valor. But turns out he studied Napoleonics in college. That was his main thing. So so we're probably going to explore that some. And there's of course, expansions coming out. I know Blood and Steel expansion, which is our Victorian era game, is getting worked on presently, and a few other things like that. But I think for now we could just leave it at that. I could sit here talking about our plans for like another hour, so I'll just leave the most the ones that have been most prominent in my mind for now out there.
We'll invite Rufus one day. We together we'll sit, we'll chat. So Blood and Crown, as I said before, you just tell us where we can find it, the Kickstarter and everything. I would think from what you told me, it sounds like a very interesting game. I think you captured the feel of the 100 Years' War, and believe me, I'm very familiar with the period. I'm looking very forward to playing the game. So I'm leaving you to close the chat by telling us where we can find it, the Kickstarter, and when it will be available, any sites, Facebook pages, whatever you want to tell, so the guys will follow your pages and the links and find everything about the game.
Right. So Eric, I'll let you go ahead and talk a little bit here, so people get tired of my voice.
The Kickstarter is, I think it's just like kickstarter.com/Firelock Games, and then Blood and Crowns. I think it's spelled out and. And then there's a Facebook group. I highly encourage, if you're interested in the game, join that Facebook group. The community is like out of control already. And then there's a Discord channel that's also been. I'm not very good on Discord, but people have been talking about there and posting stuff. There's like I said, the community. That's pretty much probably the top 3 places to get information on the game right now. Of course, content creators like yourself have been reaching out, and and you guys have been doing a fantastic job of promoting the game. And I'll take the opportunity to say that this has been, and I'm just absolutely humbled by everybody's response to this game. I appreciate everything you were saying, and and everything. It's just been an incredibly positive experience, and I'm overwhelmed and a little stressed out about it in a good way. And I'm looking forward to getting this in everybody's hands and let them roll some dice here. And what is crazy enough, just a few weeks, at least the digital release will come out in a few weeks, and people will be able to start rolling dice and earning renown. And like my little tagline for this game for the whole time has been "Qui peut move all," in the words of Geoffrey de Charnay, "He who does more is worth more." And so I hope everybody gets out there and earns some renown really soon.
Yeah, I will say too, we will have in next week. I don't know when this is going up, but today's the 15th. So not next week, the week after next, we will have we have some Perry miniatures coming in, so those will be on our website. So anybody, especially in stateside, can get if you're thinking about minis or models, we're gonna have some good options to get you started. And they should be coming out just as the project ends, so it's kind of good timing. So you could jump on that, grab some, and the PDFs will be coming out very quickly on the heels of the end of the Kickstarter, as fast as technology allows. But apparently, I've just realized through Kickstarter, because I have like a 1-week grace period for people to fix their payments or whatever. Yeah, it'll probably be after a week that the Kickstarter's out that we'll deliver and that'll give us time to get it set up and make sure everything's working the way it needs to, because we kind of can't until we put it up. So one of those things you can't really check on before. But anyway, it's going to be so that's one of the coolest things. That's one of the things I'm most excited about this, because when you do these Kickstarters, you want to get it out, like it's done, and it's like cool, it's done, but now we got to get it to people. And it's because obviously the backers want to get their stuff that they paid for, but even for us, it's really the same thing. We really want to get it to people. So when you're sitting on a project for so long, it's just agonizing. So the fact that we're gonna be able to give the PDF immediately is so cool for me. So I'm really excited that people are just gonna be able to jump right in right after it's over. So that's gonna be cool.
And if you happen to find yourself in Kissimmee, Florida next weekend, the weekend of the September 22nd, 21st, 22nd, 23rd in 2023, depending on when people watch this, we'll be there.
Which is in the Orlando area for those unfamiliar with Florida. So if you're in Disney or something. Yeah.
Yeah, why would you go to Disney? Come see Blood and Crowns at Hurricane 23.
Correct. So that is the right choice.
No, that's fantastic. When I told you I'm part of the Kickstarter, I received a message around the end of October that probably everything will be ready. Obviously, could be there, but I'm really looking forward to it. And the first thing I'll do is read them and do a battle report. Believe me, my battle reports are followed by hundreds of thousands. They're waiting for. So I'm really looking forward for this this game. Eric, do you want to say something last about the game before we close? Something that we missed, or you, Mike, something that I missed in the questions, something that you want to mention before we close?
I can't remember. I think you covered everything. Can you think of anything, Mike?
No, I would just like to say, as always, I'm super appreciative of all of our backers, especially you right in this moment, Nick, but of everyone, because it's always just so cool and humbling that people are willing to put their support behind this and get excited for the stuff we're excited about. So I really appreciate it, and I know that we'd be nowhere without all you guys. So you guys are the best. Continue being awesome, and we'll continue giving you awesome stuff. So that leads to the best of our ability.
Fantastic. So one question I have before we close. I don't want to believe that. So are you this game, Blood and Crowns, this 100 years old game? We're discussing about campaigns, about big battles, or about solo. You were talking about it. Is this in the back of your head to put to expand it a bit, to add to give add-ons, even for free, for example, as in the group, let's say? Is it in the back of the game something like this, in the back of your head, to give it some extra stuff that will give the option to someone to play a bigger battle or fight solo or something like that?
Yeah, the solo, which I think we'll probably do, it will probably be up to something we give out. Right now you could go on our website into the download section, and the solitaire rules for Blood and Plunder are there. So there's things like that we do for most games. Yeah.
No,
but I'll let Eric see if Eric. I don't know. Eric has plans up.
But the short list. So I get this is a question I got like literally from the second the group went live. People have been asking me like, "Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? Are you going to do that?" And which is awesome because I just love to hear what people are excited about. But I think the short list right now is I would like to cover sieges at some point. And
fantastic idea.
Yeah, zoom in. No, obviously not like the entire wall, but like zoom into like a breach or like a an escalade or something like that. The second thing would be the War of the Roses. I think that's a very small step for this game, especially if any kind of with the siege you're introducing gunpowder kind of comes into it in the 100 Years War in the siege environment before it really gets much field use. And then the third thing would be, and this is probably because it ties very closely in with I think a lot of the Blood and Plunder stuff, would be to do the Reconquista of Granada and cover some of the Iberian Peninsula, because at the same time you can kind of back sweep and pick up like John of Gaunt's campaign with the Portuguese, where he unsuccessfully tried to secure himself the Castilian throne. So those are probably the top three, but that is definitely not the entire list. I gotta pace myself. But there's a lot I want to do.
That's great. That's fantastic news. So, guys, thank you so much. Eric, thanks so much for coming. Thank you for talking about this game. I think the Kickstarter ends. It's 1 more week remaining, just for the viewers to know if they still have time, or 2 more weeks.
2 more weeks as of this recording.
Okay, 2 more weeks. So there's 2 more weeks to back the game, and then it's closed, and then you can start preparing for distribution of the digital parts of the game. I mean, the digital.
I'll give you the exact date it ends right now. It ends on the 28th of September.
The 28th of September?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's fine. That's it. So thank you both for joining me. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this chat. And thank you guys for joining me. Just go to the Kickstarter, get the game. It's amazing. I think it's amazing from what I heard and from what I read. Trust me, I know 100 Years War, you know that. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks again for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for coming, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.